Sleep problems are one of the biggest complaints that patients bring to the clinic. And the truth is, of course, they don't only disrupt the patient, but they often disrupt the person lying in bed next to them. Now, on my website, you'll find lots of videos talking specifically about the symptoms, the patterns of sleep disruption, etc. What I wanted to do here was to tell you something about the research that I'm doing on sleep. And I think it's going to go a little bit beyond sleep because that's where the journey has taken us. So the initial work that I've been able to do has been courtesy of having the research clinic and all those fantastic patients who volunteered their time and come through and had the assessments done. And what this allowed us to do was to publish some of the first studies, especially in Parkinson's disease, that actually looked at what was going on with sleep. What were the associations with sleep, what impact it had on the patients, quality of life, etc. But also what the clinical associations were. So tapping back into this, are there different subtypes of Parkinson's disease? Yes, it looks as though sleep problems seem to be associated with different patterns or, if you like, phenotypes of Parkinson's and their symptoms. Now, it comes as no surprise to you to learn that poor sleep is going to be associated with poor memory and probably worse mood. But teasing these things apart is important so that we can actually target therapies for the future. Now, in terms of the more biological or basic science research that I've gone on to do, it kind of can be divided up into a few areas. One which I want to just touch on quickly is the problem that I see a lot in the clinic, which is daytime sleepiness. That is to say, not the nighttime problems of sleep, but actually just falling asleep during the day. Very problematic for patients, especially as the disease progresses. And our studies have shown the amount of increased sleep that's going on during the day in these people, using some clever accelerometry technology or actigraphy, a little bit like those devices that people can buy to measure their movements. But effectively, this is very important because in actual fact, it's allowed us to sort of, if you like, frame the question. And I'm delighted that there are now pharmaceutical companies out there who are taking it very seriously and actually trying to bring trials along to see if we can wake up as sleepy patients. And I think those will be very exciting, and hopefully we'll have those going here in Australia. In terms of other aspects of research that I've been involved in so far, I guess one of the obvious ones is the idea of REM sleep behavior disorder. This is where patients are acting out their dreams. At least half of all patients with Parkinson's, at least 75% of patients with Lewy body dementia, and pretty much all of the patients with multiple system atrophy have this pattern of behavior. And the work that I've been involved in looking at this has had a look at some of the clinical associations of this, but also more recently we've been trying to see if we can treat this behavior. And I think it's fair to say that it's not an easy thing to treat, and some of the results we're getting out suggest that the part of the problem is that we're not going to be able to capture enough of the events to be having a definitive trial that will help us. But it will spark further research in the field, and I'm part of the international study group for REM sleep behavior disorder, and there is a lot of work going on in that space. Predominantly, that area is interested in those people who have dream enactment behavior but don't yet have one of those brain diseases. And this is an area that we've been collecting data on, and we've had some fantastic patients come through with these sleep behaviors who haven't got brain diseases at this time, but to help us to record the details. And we're now part of this large consortium across the world where we're able to actually provide the data and say, hey, what is it about this guy or girl that might have a sleep problem that might predict who will go on and get a brain disease and when they will go on and get a brain disease. You'll see from other videos on my website that people who develop this dream enactment behavior have high rates of transitioning to those brain diseases. And I'm very excited by some of the work we've been able to do with those patients who've come in and allowed us to collect their data, because we're now actually seeing that we can correlate some of the tests that they've done with us, whether it's memory testing or physical testing on our fantastic magic carpet, which measures the pressure as patients walk across it, but also combining those with some of our clever brain scanning, where we can get pictures of the brain while patients like this are doing things. And we're seeing relationships that, if you like, allow us to determine who might be going on to get a disease and when that might happen and which disease, which of course is incredibly important when we ask the question, who are we going to pick for a drug trial if we had something that slowed them getting this disease? And this is very important to all of us. The next area of sleep disturbance that I wanted to touch on is actually, if you like, fragmented sleep and what's going on in the brain. Our work again has had a look across various conditions to see with brainwave recordings and also muscle recordings during sleep what the patterns of activation are in the brain. And some of these patterns we've been able to correlate with cognitive processing and processes, I should say, and also with other if you like, physical symptoms like mood disorder. So there are lots of areas of detail that we can get out of those sleep studies. The other area which kind of overarches all of this comes under a term of chronobiology or circadian biology. And people may be familiar with the concept of circadian rhythms, so night and day, and the fact that our bodies do different things in the night than they do in the day. The question is, why do they do that? And why is it important in the degenerative disease that I look after? So the regulation of night and day, or the clocks in our body, is very complex. And in a simple level, you can say, well, actually, light enters the eye, it triggers the release of a chemical that allows your brain to stay awake until the light goes down, and then that chemical goes up, and that chemical being melatonin, and that might allow us to, if you like, control things. So we can measure the melatonin levels, and that's what some of the research we've done in the past has looked at, and it's shown dysregulation, not only in Parkinson's, but also in people who look destined to go on and get Alzheimer's and other dementias. So this is a very important way for us to think about this. It also raises a more basic, fundamental question, which is, could it be that this dysregulation in the circadian system, the chronobiology, is playing a role, an important role, in actually the cells dying? And to take that one step forward, what might blow your mind is the fact that actually not only are we at an organism level producing a circadian rhythm through things like melatonin, but every individual cell in our body is going off a rhythm. And these rhythms are determined by what we call the clock genes. So just as there are genes that produce enzymes that might clear things out of your cell or digest your food, what we're talking about here is genes which essentially, when they produce their product, these proteins, they actually produce them on a sort of 24-hour cycle. And some of them go up in the day and go down in the night, and some of them go up in the night and go down in the day. And this regulation is obviously very important because it's happening in every cell. In terms of the biology of degenerative diseases, it might then raise the question, well, is there anything special about that? Let's say, for example, garbage was only cleared out of cells overnight. We know ourselves, in our day-to-day lives, we put the garbage out and it comes round and there's a garbage clearance once a day. It's usually very early in the morning. But if we didn't put the garbage out, it wouldn't get cleared. So what we might be looking at in the sort of neurodegenerative brain space is perhaps when we lose these rhythms, that actually other cellular processes are going wrong too. They're not optimal, they're not a way of resisting your disease. And it's possible that, of course, these play into which disease you might get, how aggressive that disease might be. So I'm very lucky again to have a fantastic team around me and have some clever chronobiologists, and we've actually been looking at cells that have been taken from our patients at various times of the day. So including taking a little swab from inside the mouth, the buccal mucosa, and taking those cells and saying, well, hey, what are your clock genes doing now? It's 6 o'clock in the morning, for example, and then comparing that through the day. And interestingly, it looks as though there are differences between people who don't have disease, people that do have disease, and interestingly, people who are at risk of getting the disease. So these are the areas that we're very interested in because, of course, it may well be that if we could perhaps retrain the cells to get their rhythm back, it might be a way of targeting all of these degenerative diseases of the brain. So this is an area that we're pursuing vehemently, but of course we can do none of this without the support of the people who come and help us, those patients who are kind enough to get involved in the research. So I'd just like to use this opportunity to say thank you for what you've done.